when you go through grief, sometimes you'd wake up and not even realize that they're gone. And then it hits you, and then your day starts based on that. But I found it really ramped up towards the evenings. The world would go quiet and you would be left alone with your thoughts. I definitely had anger towards God. Like, I definitely asked the question why. At the same time, there was a parallel of, I've got nowhere else to go. Where else shall I go but to the Lord? He's big enough for my questions. Surely he knows what he's doing. If I've trusted him this far, if he's answered prayer this far, if I've seen miracles already.
Welcome to the Stop Faking Fine podcast, Ryan Bowles. I'm so excited that you're here.
Thanks for having me, and it's cool because we've been hanging out a bunch, and it feels like friends. So I like hopping on a podcast where you are friends and not strangers.
Oh my gosh! And if there's not anything that's going to bring you closer than grief, a grief journey, a grief brother, a grief conversation. You and your wife Kaylee both have had parents that have died, and you've built a brand around helping to support grievers. From this perspective, I have so many questions for you. Let's dive in.
Let's
because
do it.
Your experience having a parent die is such a different perspective. Your experience is just so different than my experience having had my husband died. So without further ado, like, how old were you when your dad died?
Yeah, I was 23. The way that I remember that, because I'm not good with dates, numbers and things like that in the past, because to me, I don't know, for some people it's burnt in their memory. I remember where I was, what I was doing, but the age that I was, I don't remember. Now that it's coming 12 years on. So I was 23. The way I remember that is Michael Jordan. Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, sharing the 23. That's how I remember.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that is really kind of priceless to have that memory, and that's how you remember the 23. Can you bring me back to the moment? Like, what do you remember about that exact moment?
I was studying for a university exam, and I was in a public library with my best friend at the time. We were head down, bum up, textbooks open, pens all over the table, like headphones in, just locked into studying. It was a chemistry exam. And, I didn't end up finishing. I dropped out of uni, just so everyone's aware. Like, it wasn't my cup of tea. But I was studying. And so that day, I vividly remember my phone ringing. It was Mum. And I was like, not now, Mum. Like, I'm studying. I've got this exam coming up in a couple of days' time. But something in my spirit just said, pick up the phone. And so I answered. I said, Mum, like, I can't really talk now. And she said, hey, you might need to come home. I think your dad's been in an accident, but I don't know. And so that was the start of it. And little did I know, like, the backstory, but I knew Dad had been getting flying lessons. He had acquired his private pilot's license, which means you can fly small planes. His dream and goal long-term was to take myself, Mum, and my brother on vacations, holidays and trips. And so he'd gone and bought a plane and had it shipped over from the States, put it together.
Okay.
He didn't put it together. The aircrew mechanics put it together. And he'd been flying this plane to get used to it and to learn its dynamics and how it works and the feel of it. And so this was just another test flight that he was up with his co-pilot, and they came across issues and had to try and make an emergency landing in a farm just south of Queensland where we live. So,
oh my gosh. And both of them died, or what happened? He was in an accident and then went to the hospital?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So they actually managed to land the plane. They had to come under power lines, land in somebody's, farmland, private property.
Yep.
The plane landed quite forcefully.
Abruptly.
Yeah, I'd say.
Yeah.
And so, it's not just this, like you see in the movies where the plane comes down and they manage to land. It would have been a very firm landing. They broke through a bunch of fences before coming to just a random concrete block that was in the field that ripped open the fuselage and would have set it on fire immediately. And the coroner's report said that if the field had been another 50 yards further or longer, there would have been potentially a chance of survival. But that concrete block actually flipped the plane down an embankment and trapping both my dad and his co-pilot in that wreck. So both died on the site. So little did I know any of that was going on. I just raced. I left all my stuff with my buddy Toby. I said, I got to go. I'll catch up later.
Yeah.
I jumped in the car and sped home. I found my mum just in a ball, just absolutely like inconsolable, just almost like not screaming, but inconsolable. And I comforted her. My brother was out at the time, comforted mum, got my brother on the way home. I jumped on the phone to the police to find out what if, because so much worry, anxiety just in that moment of not knowing.
So many questions.
The way that my mum found out was she received a call from one of the newspapers here in Australia saying, "Hi, Mrs. Bowles, I'd like to ask you some questions about the accident your husband's been in." And she hung up
that's how she found out?
That's how she found out. So she hung up the phone and thought, it must be a wrong number. She was just in this, like, it's just like a shock. Like, that's not me. That's not true. A second newspaper called, same question. And that's when she thought, man, there could be truth to this. Like, he is out flying.
He's out flying, and my jaw is on the floor that the newspaper reporters knew before
I don't know
anyone.
Yeah.
To know that that's who, and I guess when you take off from the air, when you take off, it's recorded who's flying the plane, who's in the plane, and all of that. But oh my gosh. So in that moment, you are consoling your mom, and like my heart breaks for your mom right now, because that's my story of that grief. But what is your role in supporting her? That's a moment now that your life is forever marked by, before and after your dad passed.
Totally. Yeah. You might think about it too, right? Like, when you look back in time, it was like, was that before he passed or after he passed?
Mm-hmm.
Those memories and those marker moments.
Mm-hmm.
Those things are absolutely burned into my memory. I hopped on the phone, had a wonderful constable who said, look, we don't know all the details yet. I'll call you back. And so I came back out to mum. My brother had got home at that point. I said to them the advice and the wisdom that dad had passed down to us, through the years, was that, not to worry until you find out, because worry doesn't help anybody or anything. Yeah. And so in that moment, we tried as best we could just to wait. The call came back. I left the room, and he delivered the news to me while I was in my bedroom alone. And it was almost like time stood still at that point. Yeah. I felt like the only person on the planet, even though my mum and brother were so, a room away, I just felt like I was the only one left hearing this news. I came back out to the living room. Before I could get a word out, they knew before I said a word that,
because it was on your face. Confirmed. Like they knew based on your demeanor walking out of that room.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can't hide that.
Yeah. My brother got up. He just ran for the door. He bolted. Thankfully, I'm 6'4". Yeah. My arms, I just grabbed him and I tackled him and I held him on the ground. Because in those moments, we try and make these, we don't try, we just make these split decisions that can change so much. He would have got in his car, probably would have done 100 mile an hour somewhere, put other people in danger. And I just cooled him off for a bit and held him down. I think our good friends arrived at that point, and then they got around us as well. That is
so mature of you at 23 to say, I'm going to bear hug you and bring you to the ground, essentially. And were you essentially the grief leader for your brother and for your mom?
Yeah, in a strange sense, I just took up the mantle. It was almost like I just stepped into dad's shoes, really just immediately. And I didn't think about tackling him. It was just what naturally came to me, right?
Right.
So that was
it's your God-given talent, right? That was your natural reaction. And then in the years after that, how do you think you led, or can you share? It's not how do you think. Can you share a little bit more about how you led your mom through the grief journey and led your brother? I just am so in awe by your story and your ability to just lead in that moment, because grief is hard and you had your own grieving to do while you were trying to hold up those around you. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I was just sharing this with a group of women just yesterday. This same story, and so it's one that I've told. I've been fortunate to be able to tell this hundreds of times now over the years, and I'll share a bit more as to how that sort of has happened. But in those very early moments, Mum was just in pieces. As you know, and as listeners know, it's like unable to think whether I should eat or not, it's the simplest of things. And so, from those simple things of like, hey, Mum, I'm going to make you some toast or a coffee or a tea. Thankfully, we had friends come and stay with us as well. So it wasn't just me knowing what to do. They also helped carry that weight for a solid 6 to 8 weeks. They stayed with us, our good friends.
That's amazing. Like, that is amazing. So if you're listening right now, you felt that was super helpful, that those friends stayed with you.
We've journeyed with them for 30 years. They've been my parents' friends for 30 years. They're currently in their 80s at the time. They were in their 70s, but so fit, agile, sharp, caring. And so they flew up from Melbourne. Every year they would fly up in the winter to escape the Victorian cold, come up to ours. So they would do that anyway, but this wasn't their usual time. They'd already been up that year, but they got on the next flight. They were up here and they planned to stay indefinitely. So that was an incredible blessing.
I just my heart is racing while you're sharing the story, because it's so impactful to have someone that loves to that level and is able to show up in that moment to serve and help.
And it's so rare.
So rare.
Because not everybody has that, and not, people need to work, and thankfully our friends, they're retired and they're able to travel. And so it was a huge blessing. Yeah,
a huge blessing. So as you're leading your mom through this grief journey, how do you think that affected your own grief journey?
Yeah, well, I'll share a little bit more as to how I probably led her, and that'll help shape how my grief journey played out. But for the next 18 months, when you go through grief, at least for my story, it was waking up in the morning. Sometimes you'd wake up and not even realize that they're gone, because it's normal. And then it hits you, and then your day starts based on that. But I found it really ramped up towards the evenings. The sun would set, you'd realize that the world would go quiet, and you would be left alone with your thoughts when you end up in your bed at night. And so I found grief to be at its height, its most heightened state of an evening, when it was just you and your thoughts alone in a dark room. And so for my mom, I feel like they were 10x, 100x, where I was at. And so the evenings were really, really difficult for her. So I would actually she would get ready for bed. I would make sure she got comfortable in bed. I would jump into Dad's side while she read. I would read as well until she fell asleep. Sometimes she'd be burnt out from the day. It'd be early, but sometimes it'd be 11 p.m., 11:30. And finally I'd look over and she'd be asleep. And I would go over, make sure she's tucked in, turn the light off, head back downstairs as quietly as I could to my room, and then get back to sleep myself. And so that, that process,
I have tears in my eyes right now while I'm listening to you share that, to have that, for you to be 23. I mean, my boys were 6, 8, and 10. So my boys were little and didn't have, not that they didn't have a clue, but didn't have that level of awareness to show up for someone.
Different. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they would have loved you in different ways that I didn't love my mom, in all of their beauty. And so I continued putting her to bed like that for around 18 months. And that, probably affected my grief in a few different ways. I would say that my compassion and my empathy and my love grew through that, which are all wonderful things. I would also
Mm-hmm.
say that we can talk about, I was in a band during that period of my life. And so 2 weeks after Dad died, we had a tour booked in interstate. And so I decided to go on that tour still. And
Okay.
I got to share Dad's story, or my story, our story, the very first time I stepped back up on stage in front of hundreds of kids. And so from that moment on, it was like an every night occurrence that I would be sharing it. And so despite, I guess, having to protect, care for, love, and carry Mum
Mm-hmm.
through, I had an outlet where I really could sort of process that in my own space. And that was through metal music, which is,
I just can picture you like on the drums, like beating the drums as hard as you can. Like, what instrument did you play?
Well, good question. I drum now in church. Drums has always been my first love. In our bands that we grew, I was the front man. I was the vocalist. So I was jumping around. I was jumping into the crowd. I was off speakers. I was screaming my lungs out every night.
Oh my gosh. That is such an outlet. That is such a great grief outlet. We all need our tools and strategies. And that is
seriously,
that makes me smile so big, because that is such a great outlet for that grief.
And specifically because, like, as you would know, the feeling that rises up, and I don't know how you dealt with it at different times, but you just want to scream. But if you're in a shopping center, if you're, at school with the kids, or, at work, that isn't a natural way to deal with what's inside of you. And so we naturally suppress it, but do we ever release it? That's the question.
Well, I mean, hello, we're on a podcast called Stop Faking Fine. I mean, I suppressed that grief down low for years and years and years, because I wasn't the cover in a rock band, and I didn't have the opportunity to jump around on stage. Although I did teach spin classes, and I certainly got my anger out, yelling at some people and yelling at myself doing that. But we all need that outlet for that. That just makes me so happy.
Yeah. So we got to tour for, another 3 years after Dad died. We wrote an album called Overcomer, which was our story, infused with like how really Christ brought me to that place of knowing that we can overcome through him.
Yeah.
And that story, reached millions of people worldwide. And thankfully, by the grace of God, we were able to tour. We came to the States. We were up in Canada. We were in New Zealand, Japan, Australia. Like, it was and this is when people might ask me sometimes, how do you look at your dad's death? And I think, man, I don't think about this anymore, but I would do anything to have him back. However, the things that we're doing now wouldn't have happened if I didn't have that life-changing event occur as well. And so it's this real juxtaposition. It's this real dichotomy, should I say, of these two things. Sure, I want my dad more than anything, but at the same time, I don't know the journey I'd be on right now, the purpose that I feel in my life, if we hadn't have lost him like we did.
That is such a great way to summarize that, because I think we all would want that person back. Like, I would want nothing more than for Jason to come back. And when you shared a little bit earlier about how at night, that's when your grief would get worse, and that every single day you kind of relive that. For probably the first year after my husband died, every time the door opened, I looked like, is it you? Are you home from work? Is it you? And then I would catch myself and be like, Dana, that man is dead. He is not walking through the door. But you kind of relive these little moments throughout the next few years, and really forever. I mean, I no longer look at the door and think that he's walking through, but there are definitely moments in your life where you're like, oh, my dad, like, I wish that he was here to see this, to live this. Like, what are some of the moments that you feel that the most?
I definitely had the door experience. Like,
Yeah.
our home, the garage was on the ground floor, and then living was up above, and so the
Yep.
stairs were the entrance to the home. And so when we heard that hallway door open downstairs and footsteps up the stairs, I just expected to turn and see Dad,
Hmm.
and that same response. I'd ask him how his day was, and he'd say, it
Yeah.
was a big day or what was going on, and so we expected that. The real big one, though, which was highly triggering for many years, was seeing a phone call from my mum or my brother, because it was that
Oh,
first phone call that I received when I got the news that something
yeah.
could be off. And so seeing that, I'd want to answer as quickly as possible, but with like an anxious spirit. And the
Yeah.
first thing's like, "Are you okay? Are you all right?" "I'm fine. I'm just seeing if you need anything, from the shops while we're here."
Yeah.
And
That's so good, because it's a trigger, because they were the ones that had called you. And I have another question, like, as that Holy Spirit download for you. I love that you are a faith-filled believer, and I love the conversations we have around Christ. And when that moment happened and you were like, okay, something in my spirit is telling me to answer the phone. What were your thoughts and your Christian journey after that? Because I think we've shared before, and those listening, everyone knows that, like, for me, I kind of got mad at God, and I was like, we breaking up for a minute. Like, I'm kind of frustrated with you. So can you share more about your journey to lean in?
Yeah, I definitely had anger towards God. Like, I definitely asked the question
Yeah.
why. Those two, the emotion of anger and the question of why definitely circulated for, I can't tell you how long, but it was definitely
Yeah.
there. At the same time, there was a parallel of, I've got nowhere else to go. Where
Yeah.
else but to the Lord? Like, that's no person, no activity or sport or my music, nothing could
Yeah.
relieve or answer the pain that I was experiencing. And so, literally, that's the only thing that came back to me, was like, where else shall I go but to the Lord? He's big enough for my questions.
Hmm.
Surely he knows what he's doing. If I've trusted him this far, if he's answered prayer this far, if I've seen miracles already, I'd seen deaf ears hear for the first time, I'd seen broken bones healed. Surely, if I believe that God is in control of those moments in my life, surely he
Yeah.
knows what he's doing here. That didn't give me closure or necessarily peace continually, but it just pointed me in the right direction to at least
Yeah.
go, I don't know how I'm going to reach the destination, but
Yeah.
there are a couple of roads here that if I follow these, some might be shorter and faster, but really steep. Some might be long and windy, and it's going to take me to
Yeah.
different places. But that's sort of how I anchored myself. They were the sort of thoughts.
Do you think that your band members, the guys in your band, were helpful in kind
Ooh,
of
good question.
catching
Oh,
you in this journey and helping you to believe that God had a bigger plan for your life?
I've never been asked that question. That is such a great question. And when I look back, those memories are so fond with my band.
Yeah.
It's funny that it's actually brings me to tears to think about those guys, because
Yeah.
when we were all at the same school together,
Okay.
but no one was my age. Everyone was younger than me. And to give you the rundown, when we started, I was 21. I
Okay.
think the next was 18, and then two 16-year-olds
Okay.
and a 13-year-old.
Oh, wow.
So, right. So that's when we played our first show. But when we started, he was like 11 or 12 when we started practicing. And so these guys were really almost like sons in a way to me.
Uh-huh.
That's how I thought about them and cared for them. And so I saw all of them reach, 18 years old and sort of those milestones. And so, man, we did a lot of life together. We were family. And so when Dad died, you know, bless them, they didn't know how to deal with that. But they were
Yeah.
there. They didn't know how to
Yeah.
support me at such a young age either. You know, they knew my
But they
dad.
showed up. that they showed up.
They showed up. They showed up, and like, you know, we had shows to play, and so there would just be silence, and you know, we would still just eat bowls of ice cream together after practice and do things regularly. And to me, I think that was just such a sweet comfort. And then when I needed it, they were there for a hug. They were there to pray with me, despite still not knowing what to do.
But I think that is the priceless part of it, right? That they were there to pray. They were there to show up. You had the group of men that were there to play instruments and, you know, be in the band and practice. But also when you needed them, they were there to pray for you. And I think, or pray with you. And I think that is really, I would imagine that helped you go home and show up for your mom. Yeah,
big time. Yep, absolutely. You know, it was it's definitely an outlet, and having people around you that don't disappear at the first sign of trouble. You know, these guys, sure, we were a band, but they weren't going anywhere. It wasn't like, oh well, Ryan's lost the plot. You know, I'm out. You know, so that they were just there, and I think that's one of the keys, being there for somebody.
Yeah, in that moment. So as you're growing through your grief, like the next stage in all of this is moving forward. How do you feel that you kind of moved forward through that grief? Like what were some of the things that you did that helped you in this grief journey above and beyond the band?
Yeah, we had a grief counselor. I was I'd never seen a therapist of any sort at that stage. You know, we'd grown up in church, so we'd been around loving people who, you know, have tough conversations with you and are there for you to pray or to just take you out and see what's up. But I'd never seen a therapist. But I just felt that where Mum was at in her headspace and reconciling her head with her heart and with God, because, you know, Mum and Dad, when they married, Mum was when they started dating, should I say, Mum was 16, Dad was 25. So 9-year gap when Mum hasn't even reached, you know, adulthood in the Western world.
Right.
And so when I think, and they met through church, Dad was always leading in different capacities, and same in their business. But when Dad died, I really discovered that Mum's faith was leaning on Dad. And so when he died, that just surfaced all of the things that she hadn't questioned or dealt with or taken to the Lord or to pastors or trusted people in those 29 years of marriage. And so it hit the floor when Dad died, or hit the fan. I could say it hit the fan, right? And so I could see it was going to be too big a job for her on her own, or even with friends, to reconcile all of those thoughts. And I was like, we've got to see someone, if not you, like all of us. And so we found a beautiful Christian counselor by the name of Zia here. I remember her still to this day. And a big thing on my heart was like, man, I need to know that you on the other side of this couch, you need to know grief. And so my first question was like, you know, have you lost anybody? And she said, my son actually has passed. And immediately I'm like, we're in the right room. And so seeing a professional in that journey, I can't remember how far into it was. It may have been like, you know, that 18-month to 2-year period. It was a big help. And especially when Mum handed that trust over to her, she then looked forward, in a sense, to going to those sessions. That's right.
Yeah. She was ready to do the work to grow through the grief, right? So your mom has not remarried, correct?
Correct. She's still very happily married to my dad.
Yes. And I mean, I love that for her. How does that affect you personally?
We're all for it. You know, like my brother and I, we've had these conversations many times over the years. Mum's part of it. We're in the same room and we're like, you know, Mum, how do you still feel about, you know, being married to Dad? And, you know, and she's like, no, I'm right there. You know, she wears his wedding ring on her thumb. and she's had that because it's the finger it fits on, bigger hands and so forth.
I kind of love that. That is,
yeah.
I kind of love that. There's a lot of different ways that we all grieve and different things that we all do with the rings, the watches, the things that keep that person alive in your heart and in your life. And I really love that. I don't know anyone that wears their husband's band on their thumb. I kind of like that.
Yeah, because most husbands' bands won't fit their wives just by the nature of their fingers. So the thumb, it's just managed to fit there. And it's a beautiful reminder to me, even if I just see mum's hands and now she's holding our daughter and like I see that wedding ring there and it's like dad is in the room and holding my daughter just the same as my mum.
I love that so much.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So the second part of letting go, of course, is moving forward, and you are married and your wife, Kaylee, has also lost a parent, which is incredibly unique for the two of you.
And our parents both died 4 months apart. My dad, November 2012, her mum, March 2013. And so when we met, when we met and, we're having a conversation over a barbecue, we're having a sausage on some bread. I don't know if you guys do that in the States, like very basic, sport barbecue. And, and everyone sort of left and it was getting late at night and we get talking and then you find out, oh, wow, like tell me about your family. And my mum died. Oh, my dad died. And you just have this, what? Like when?
Yeah.
Oh, 2012, 2013. Oh my God. Like we both lost a parent within a few months of each other and have been on this journey ever since. And only now we've been in the same circles, but not known each other. We'd never crossed paths until this moment. So
do you think that connected your hearts right away?
Crazy. One of my I didn't know as soon as dad died, single, dating anybody else, I didn't know how that was ever going to eventuate into marriage, how they would understand or have compassion towards my grief or be able to help me cope. And, the way my brain works is it's a little bit more selfish than usual. Like I would say it's on the self side. And so I'm like, if I don't have someone that can understand, like I'm going to be needy and desperate and woe is me. And when that's not actually the way that you feel, but you're pointing out that that's the way that it can be perceived, right? Yeah. And what I might search for in a relationship, right? As to like, can you just take care of me? And I could have more down days because I could be in pitying myself. But when God brought Kaylee to me, I was like, oh man, I cannot afford to have more pity parties than I'm allowed, right? Because she's got her own grief just as much. And so God did wonders in that meeting for sure.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love that perspective. How do you think that has shaped your marriage?
Oh, huge. Yeah, huge. Kaylee's heart is so big. And the way that she cares for people is the way that she cared for her mum for 7 years through her battle with cancer. And I'm inspired by her and challenged by how big she loves and cares for people. And so it's shaped everything. It's got this unspoken level of compassion for both of us because we understand and empathy. And I guess that's where God's been leading us up until now, with what we're doing. Oh my gosh.
I love that part of it. And Kaylee's mom passed and her dad is remarried. So
remarried,
can you share like
different.
how does right. So your parents have two completely different stories, and how does that marriage make the two of you feel, or how does that change your dynamic?
Yeah, totally. Two different stories. My dad, sudden, mum never remarried. Her mum, long, and her dad remarried and quite quickly. And so they also, God-fearing family, love them. And so growing up in the faith, before her mum passed, she expressed to my father-in-law that she gave him her blessing. She gave him her blessing and not knowing what that would look like. And so when she passed, within about, and the difference is like and I talked to him, we asked these point blank questions where like,
Yeah.
we're like, why don't you cry? He hasn't cried too much since the death of Claudette. He's like, I did my grieving before she died. It was 7 years, I was having to carry her. I saw her shrivel away to nothing, her legs stopped working.
Yeah.
He's like, I did my grieving beforehand. And so when I look at that.
I think that is so like, I'm going to cry again because I can see myself in this story. I mean, my husband died within 6 weeks, but I watched him age 100 years in 6 weeks.
Man.
And when he died, he looked like a 90-year-old man. It's insane. But when other people are looking at your grief from the outside in, at your grief journey, I think it's something that is really worth talking about, that when you're caring for that person for 7 years, and for him to say, I grieved her death before she died, that stops you because it's so true and it's so meaningful. And
it's so complex because they were believing for a miracle at the same time. So you're grieving somebody who's alive, not actively. I believe it's this passive grieving because you're believing for a miracle, and you've got people around you saying we're seeing her being fully restored. So you're not grieving in the sense of I'm going to lose her. You're grieving this person that once was. It's very complex. And so, to bring that story to the marriage side, they've got 4 kids, Kaylee being the second eldest, 3 other boys. The family got together, had a meeting. They're like, man, Dad needs a woman, and he's very open about it too. He's like, I'm the remarry type. He's like, you either are or you're not the remarry. He's like, I'm the remarry type, and I needed another woman in my life. And there's no truer words. He did need another woman, and so they crazy story. And I'll probably let Kaylee tell this a little bit more in depth because I know you want to have her on the podcast too. But they affirmed him. They gave him their blessing to say, you're for it. And
Kaylee and her siblings affirmed it and gave, yes. Oh, I love that.
On board.
I love that.
And so, I think about, he started, dating with some online dating sites. That wasn't working. So they actually pointed someone out that they'd seen at church, and they actually helped orchestrate the whole thing. And she'd never been married before. And she actually wrote a book on singleness and said to God, Lord, if this is my plot, I'm willing to live it. And she wrote a book on singleness, then met Scott, my father-in-law, and married.
And they have 3 children together?
Yes. So, 4, which is Kaylee and her 3 siblings. Yep. And she was single and never married, never had kids. So.
Okay. So she has just taken on.
That's right.
Scott's kids, Kaylee and her siblings. Okay. I just didn't understand that.
Not 7, 4.
Yeah. Yes. I was like, wait, did they have more children?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That makes my heart smile so big. That is so amazing. 2 parents, 2 completely different stories, but 2 completely different experiences. And I know when my husband was in the hospital and it was quick, it was 6 weeks, I was praying for a miracle. All of the, deacons of the church, everyone coming in, praying over him. I was praying for a miracle and it didn't happen. And I was devastated after that. And I knew in my heart, like, Scott, I'm the marrying type. Like, I definitely knew that I would want to marry again. And although we never were able to have that, we did not have that conversation while he was in the hospital because we were never believing.
So fast. Like,
it was so fast, and we were never
6
believing
weeks.
for the fact that he wasn't coming home. Like, he was coming home with me. That was not the question. But we had certainly joked in like years before as like a happily married couple, struggled for that word, but that if something were to ever happen, like, for sure, you should go live your life. And if God brings someone into your life, like, you should embrace that. So I know that I have his blessing because I'm now 1 year in, happily remarried, but I know that I have his blessing in that. And I think that for anyone grieving, anyone is really important to have that,
For sure. And
heart. So
I thought I'd just add, I think it's so big for people because like illness and sickness it's just so prevalent, and that's so many people's story, especially a cancer journey or some form of sickness that doesn't lead to the outcome that we're hoping, we're praying for.
yeah.
And I know for Kaylee, one of the biggest, I guess, keys in her testimony is that they were praying for healing, but came to the understanding that her healing wasn't earth side, it was actually heaven side.
Yeah.
And so resting in that, knowing that healing has taken place. And this is where I put myself, and this is probably going back, what helped see me through those struggles was knowing that like he's no longer here dealing with the crap that we have to deal with here, the pain, the lies, the heartaches. I didn't understand the pain that he'd lived, and this is a whole probably another conversation, but seeing his mum die, and then second of all, more recently, as we've now had a daughter, he was actually married previously and had a daughter of his own. And at about 5 years old, based on the toxicity of the relationship, had to release her and say, I can no longer be around because of, the lies that are being fed to you. And he had to release his daughter. He never saw her again from the age of 5 until the day he died. And it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart because he lived with this pain. I never got to ask him those questions, but he is free from all of that pain.
Yeah,
he is anxiety and those deep hurt.
He is free from all of that. I think that's a really great point. I know that when Jason was in the hospital, like I was upset with God because he did not answer my prayer. But I came to recognize that I do believe that his prayer was answered because he, like Kaylee's mom, was sick, like, and living in her house, and her dad had to care for her month over month, over year. Jason, my husband, was like, I want anything but that. Like, I do not want for my children at 6, 8, and 10 to live their lives around me in a hospital bed in the family room. And so, although I was very upset with God when he died, years after I came to the realization that Jason's prayer was answered because it wasn't over years and years and years. It was quick. It was in 6 weeks. You were here, you were gone. And now we have the aftermath to pick up. I have a question for you.
It's almost like if you, and these are crazy, like hypotheticals. It's almost like if you had two options in your hand, would you prefer to die fast and, and quick, or slow and like real? Which one would you choose? Like, on one hand, the pain is over faster, but you see less of your family. On the other hand, the pain is accentuated, but you see more of your family. It's a tough one, but I can hear what you're saying, and I would choose the faster route if that was my case. If you
were given the chance and the ability, you can let God know that you would like to be called home. Fast forwarding to today, can we talk about the Grief Headquarters for a minute and the community that you are building and just the mission that you and Kaylee are on based on your own grief journeys and you're wanting to serve others in this space?
Yeah, totally. Kaylee and I, like, as soon as we got together, to give some backstory, I was running a consulting business, helping business coaches around the world with their marketing, their sales. And so I'd been doing that for a number of years. She jumped into the business with me 6 months into our dating life. So we've been now working together 4.5 years side by side. Her desk's right here to my left, day in, day out. And people are like, don't you guys ever get sick of each other? No, we don't, because like we're on a mission together. And if I feel, and I know it's not everybody's take, but I feel if you can't work together, you can't work together in the home either. And so we totally married those two together and loving it. And about 2 years ago, God really started stirring our heart to go, we knew that business wasn't our forever. It wasn't a legacy we were heading down to our kids or anything like that. So we're like, God, where do you want us? Like, what have you placed in our hands? What experience do we have? And where do you want us to go? That wrestle went on for about 18 months. I mean, we lost days and days and days out of every month crying. We were face down on the floor. We had to leave and just go hiking in the bush because we didn't know the answers, and we were so hungry to find out, like, where do you want us, Lord? It wasn't until one day, on where every good conversation starts, on the toilet with your wife and our office door.
I don't know about that visual. I don't know about that, but okay, I'm still listening.
Our office door and like our upstairs bathroom, they face each other, and so the doors are just always open. We're having these conversations, and we're like, well, what about marriage? We're passionate about seeing marriages thrive. And then we're like, look, we've been married 4 years. I don't know if anyone's going to listen to what we have to say about marriage. We might put that one on the shelf, right? We'll save that to a little bit more long in the tooth. And so God then dropped into our spirit, well, grief. Well, we've both lost a parent. We've both lost multiple family and friends to different things. And like, we've walked this journey for 11 years now. And we're like, I wonder if that's something that our heart would beat for, that seeing, the widows and the orphans, like the word says, would that really make us come alive? And so from that moment on, this was early 2023. Actually, my apologies, it was June 2023. We said, let's go down this. Let's have a look. Let's see how many people are actually grieving in the world. Like, and are they actually looking for community and support? And Dana, can I tell you that in all my years, and our business, which I didn't mention before, was helping people grow communities online. I've never seen a larger hunger and community than the grief space globally. In working with thousands of coaches. And
there's no playbook for grief. Here.
That's right.
Yeah, there's no
5-step solution.
No, there's no roadmap, and we all have to walk and fall and walk again. But knowing that there is someone who has traveled your path and that understands your path with empathy and compassion is really priceless. So can you tell me more about the community? How do we join the community? How do we do all of the things, Ryan? Give it to us.
I don't know how you do all the things, but our community, our family is called Good Grief, and so that's the community that we're growing worldwide. Our Good Grief mission is to help 1 million women through grief to find life and purpose and peace after loss. And so that journey has just been wild over the last year. I mean, one of the places that you can hang out with us is on Instagram and inside of our private, Facebook group and our app. And so that's what we've been doing. We just came off a call yesterday, that we had women all around the world, like Malaysia, Los Angeles, London, all these places around the world. And finding community with people who understand is a game changer when your friends and your family just don't know what to say.
They don't know what to say, and it's not to blame them at all. Everyone, I do believe, has good intention for your grief and to try to support you in that grief, but someone that has walked the walk and has helped others just makes it that much easier. They catch you that much tighter, maybe is a good way to put it. So I will put the link for the Facebook group, for the app, for all the things. All of the details will be in the show notes. Thank you so much for sharing your heart, sharing your journey, and helping us grow through our grief, right?
The pleasure is all mine just to sit here and hang out. And so I appreciate you, Dana. Thanks so much.